everybody. Thanks for joining. This is episode 192 on the Customer Experience, Customer Centricity show. And, hi, Michael. That was fast. Today, we are taking a very serious but friendly look at mental health in these difficult times. Difficult economy, difficult job market, difficult with layoffs. And many of you have come to me privately or in our online Slack and Discord communities just to talk about how much you are struggling, and I hear you and I see you, and I wanted to bring back a good friend from our other YouTube channel, Delta CX. We've had him on before, but before we bring him in, let me just do my usual thanks to people who are supporting either of our YouTube channels. Thank you so much for your financial support, totally optional, but keeps me in streaming software, and this week, cheese. So thank you for the delicious cheese. And Olivia the dog thanks you as well. So let me change to our different shots here and bring in a good friend of the show, Dr. Seth Finkle. Hi, Ana Lucia. Dr. Seth, tell us who you are, and it's because we're here, so there's a reason.
I am indeed. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. I am Dr. Seth Finkle. I am a clinical and school psychologist, currently based in the East Coast of the United States in Pennsylvania, and glad to be back.
Yes, and I was you were at my wedding in January, and I was just listening to your karaoke version of the Pina Colada song. So you are on my mind. It was wonderful. You're on my mind and in my heart as always. So, I wrangled Dr. Seth into this because we know a lot of people have questions and concerns about coping with this. So I want to open up the link we usually use for anonymous questions during the office hours AMA sessions. Let's use that today for any comments or questions you have that you don't want to write in the public chat and have your name appear on them. So up above Dr. Seth's head, you'll see a link that says deltacx.com/links. And when you go to that page, you'll see ask a question for office hours, ask me anything. Use that today if you'd like to say something anonymously today. Otherwise, anything you put in the chat will show up on the screen with your name. So, just to get that out of the way. Seth, let's just start with maybe some general, I don't know, what's the right word? Just understanding and validation and realization of what people are going through right now. What are you seeing in your world?
Wow. Yeah. I think it's fair to say that the last 3 years have been brutal for people, regardless of where you are and what you do. It's been hard. We're still recovering from a global pandemic, from massive economic downturn, and it's not entirely clear that we're out of the woods on any of this. There's plenty of things to be stressed about. And the international economy has been equally stressed. And unfortunately, that trickles down to all of us who are trying to just do our jobs and manage. So job insecurity and uncertainty, job frustration. We've talked about burnout before. Burnout is a huge problem right now for people who are currently employed, people who are anxious about the possibility of layoffs in whatever field, and in this particular case in UX and CX, and people who may have lost jobs and are struggling with that. Not to mention the fact that all of this affects every other aspect of our lives, right? So we're not talking about some little corner of our life where everything else is fantastic. This is something that affects everything. So it'll affect our relationships. It affects our self-esteem. It affects our sense of who we are, our general identity, and how we feel about our lives. And so it's not surprising to me to hear that people are struggling in CX, UX, in tech in general, because it's everywhere right now. I think everyone's really struggling. And what I'm hearing from you, Debbie, is that your field has taken it pretty hard. So it's absolutely validating to say that I'm not at all surprised, unfortunately, to hear that there's a lot of people who are really, really hurting right now.
Yeah, there's nobody who is alone. We're all affected in various ways, and I don't want anybody to think, "Oh, it's just me. Everybody around me is doing great. We're all struggling." The question is, to what degree?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a variety of different ways that I think you and I are prepared to go with this today, but I'm very interested to hear kind of where people are at and, what experiences you're having. And if you're doing great, terrific. You don't have to feel guilty about that.
Right.
But if you're stuck in a job that you're really struggling with, if you are stuck in a job and you're worried about whether or not you're going to still have that job at the end of the week, if you lost your job, if you're just reconsidering everything at this point about your career path, I think you've come to the right place.
Yeah, we're happy to get everybody's comments and questions. If you put them in the chat, they will show up on the screen with your name, which you're certainly welcome to do. We have an open forum here. And certainly you can send them in anonymously. Use our deltacx.com/links link to send in anonymous. Pretend it's for office hours AMA. Shweta put up ghosting. I know that something that's been very difficult for the people in across tech, not just CX and UX, is many of us apply for dozens, if not hundreds of jobs, and we sometimes don't hear anything at all. Sometimes we go through multiple interviews and then we hear nothing at all. How do we try to maintain balance and confidence in something that feels so, I don't know, negative, or it feels like a negative judgment?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of the negative judgment, unfortunately, is coming from internally. I mean, it's the lack of response is the problem, and that tends to kick off all kinds of bells and whistles in our heads about what that means. Um, Honestly, I think there's so many things we can talk about, but the to start there, I mean, if you're not employed or you are employed and you're trying to get a different job and you're putting stuff out there and you feel like you're just banging your head against the wall and nothing is happening, I think that's one type of frustration. I think to feel like, as you're suggesting, to feel like that's somehow a referendum on you as an employee, um, or a potential employee. I think that's as much about us as it is anything else. And I think it's one of the benefits of having a good training in therapy, or having had a good therapist, is understanding and recognizing your own negative dialogue within yourself, recognizing that this is a long-term project, that all you need is one hit at the end of the process. You're only going to be able to take one job at a time. It is super frustrating, and we can certainly validate that. But it doesn't have to be an indication that you're doing something wrong, or that there's something bad about you, or that you're not employable. I think in many cases, it's much more about, I mean, it's like any dating situation, it's more about them than it is about you. So that's easy to say, but if that's something that's hard to own, we're going to come back to this, I have a funny feeling, over the course of this discussion a number of times, but that's something that a good therapist can help with. Someone who can, or frankly, just a good friend, someone who knows you well, and who you're really open and honest with. It's really important to begin to notice for yourself when you are your own worst critic, and you're the person who's bringing yourself down. Because I think in most job hunting situations, that's the case.
Yeah, thanks for starting out with that. And a reminder to our community members that we every other Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Italy time, which is about 3 or so hours from now, so it is today, we do our community hangout, which we've also started calling group therapy, because we all get together in a not broadcasted, not recorded, online kind of video call venue, and we just chat. And we've talked about UX, we've talked about not UX, and a couple of weeks ago we talked about someone's malignant narcissist mother, and we all chimed in on that. So, our community is getting together, offering as much as we can, even though I remind everybody I am not a qualified anything. So, I'm just a friendly friend. I want to read a couple of the comments that have popped up, especially from Ana Lucia, and then we'll go back to some of the others. Oh, thank you, Jurgen. Good to see you here. Ana Lucia said, I actually had a major breakdown a year ago. Burnout got to me, not to mention not being able to cope with a toxic workplace. When they said remote work was going to be over, I completely broke. I actually had to ask for help. It was that bad. I thought it would take me a couple of months to feel myself again, but it took way too long. My goals were derailed, unfortunately.
Hmm. I have a bad feeling that's not an uncommon story. Um, but it's always going to be hard to hear. Yeah, and thank you so much for kind of putting that out there. I know
Yeah, thank you.
this is a courageous conversation we're going to be having, and there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be putting stuff out there that I know is going to be really difficult for them to talk about, and maybe difficult for people to listen to. But I think it's crazy important. So um, yeah, so your breakdown, and I mean, the best thing that I heard in all of that was seeking help, and it does take time. It's not a quick fix. This is not something that, for most people, if you're struggling with a loss, and this is a loss, right? Let's start with that. Let's just acknowledge this for what it is. It's a loss of identity. It's a loss of confidence. It's a loss of self-esteem. It's a loss sometimes of your own sort of mental stability, and it can be a loss that trickles down to every other aspect of our lives, our relationships, our financial stability, the way we spend our time, everything, the way your thoughts go. So these are huge losses, as big as a death or a divorce, or any other major loss that we're talking about, and that takes time. That's not something that goes away quickly. Even with the best of support, we're dealing with issues that are going to require adjustment in terms of people's lives, and we can certainly talk about some kinds of recommendations for those adjustments. But it's also, in many cases, going to take assistance. It's really hard to do this alone. And that's coming from someone who's a trained psychologist who spent lots of years and lots of dollars getting to a place where I have at least a general sense that I know what I'm doing and I'm not a complete fraud. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't get there without a lot of people holding my hand along the way and helping me out. So, and that's still the case today. There's certainly no shame in that. There's no shame in the fact that it takes a long time, in many cases, to be able to feel like we've got our feet under us again. And that doesn't have to shake your sense of who you are. But again, we can talk about that.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to unravel today, and we still have over 42 minutes left, so we're getting there. I want to read a few more comments. Chi Watt said, it even affects people who are still employed because we're hanging on to it knowing that the market is so bad. And we actually got an anonymous question right before we started, and that person said, if you're stuck in your job or career, how can you survive until you can make a change? So let's talk about that a little bit for people who have jobs
Yep.
but are unhappy in those jobs and feel stuck in them because the market is so bad. They're just less likely to find that next thing.
Absolutely. So let me split this off into two things, sort of, for convenience sake and maybe for clarity. I'm going to talk about we're going to talk about folks who are stuck in a job that they're feeling is toxic and they can't stand and they're really struggling with. Maybe they're starting to question, do I even belong in this field? Is this really what I want to be doing with my life? That's one sort of area. And then there's the area of, I don't mind my job. I might even like my job, but I'm just worried that the bottom's going to drop out and I'm going to lose that job. Um, and those are two related but somewhat different circumstances. And I'll do the let me do the second one first, because I think it's a little more straightforward in some ways, and there's some concrete things we can talk about when you're dealing with things like layoff anxiety and job uncertainty. Um, I mean, the reality is when you're dealing with any kind of a market that is insecure in terms of your long-term job viability, it can lead to feeling depressed and anxious and sometimes increasing your substance use. And it becomes kind of a vicious cycle, right? You start to experience more um, social withdrawal, and you start to feel more hopeless, and you start to feel more like you're constantly under scrutiny and being evaluated in a way that feels intrusive and in some cases uncomfortable and unfair. Um, it can lead to decreased energy and lack of interest in our own self-care, all of which can have negative impact on our job performance, which ironically can actually make the problem significantly worse. So there are a few concrete things I can suggest. The first and foremost is to try to keep yourself separating fact from fiction. Because again, as I'm going to talk about a couple different times, we've already mentioned, and I'm mentioning again already, a lot of the things we struggle with are internal. It's our own internal dialogue. Some of it is gossip in the workplace as well, and some of it is just legitimate concern about kind of workplace dynamics and relationships and that sort of thing. But to be mindful of the fact that what you know to be factually true is not always the same thing as what you're afraid is going to be the case. And our anxiety is a way of rewriting all kinds of things for us. We make all sorts of predictions that in many cases aren't necessarily valid. So before we kind of ride that train, some of the best things to do are just determine what you actually know to be true about your job stability and what your workplace situation is. And if you don't know a lot, it's okay to ask people about it, to have frank, open conversations with folks. Scary as it is, it's better to know what really is than to fear something and then have to deal with all kinds of fantasy. But there are concrete, constructive things you can do. Get more information. Ask yourself, are my projects that I'm involved in high value? Does my work contribute to the overall goals that are valued by senior leadership in the organization I'm working? Legitimately, realistically, ask yourself, am I positioned where I need to be in this particular organization? And if not, are there things that I can do? And frankly, just invest in your own self-diversification. We are more than our work. Your work may be very important to you and it may be a big part of your identity, but you're more than that. And so to focus on the other things in your life that ground you, that's something that, again, we're going to come back to again and again. So just to kind of put that out there, focus on the things in your life that you have control over that give you a sense of grounding, a sense of joy, a sense of peace, a sense of identity. Dive into those things, and you're going to find that you relax a little bit in some of the other aspects of your life. And frankly, that's going to at least give the illusion, if not the actuality, of increased confidence, which is going to produce a kind of upward spiral, and it's going to make you probably more likely to hold on to a position in uncertain times. So really, these are basic kind of platitudes, but they're things about combating anxiety, which tends to go crazy at a time like this. When you're feeling like your job is insecure, focus on the things that you have control over and try to quiet your mind and get more information about what really is going on around you. And I think that's going to be your best friend. I can't hear you, Debbie.
Sorry, I had muted because I have so many air conditioners running. I wanted to jump in and read some of the comments, if that's okay, just because we have so many that are coming up and some old ones I didn't even get to. Michael says, I always tell everyone, even in a toxic environment, take advantage of the experience to prepare yourself for the future. Shweta says, +1 to diversification, but ironically, the loss of control leads to a vicious cycle of just doing more in one direction to get the illusion of control. And Ana Lucia is still sharing more of her story with us. Thank you, Ana Lucia, for that. It's really helpful. She said, my self-esteem was never that high, but it reached a historic low back then. I thought it was my fault. I was getting yelled at regularly. So was my team. Were we that incompetent? Why were we being treated like that? Why were we being used as emotional punching bags? I knew I wouldn't be able to deal with that in person, and I took a sick leave. I ended up quitting altogether when I realized during therapy that it was having a toll on my mental health and recovery. And I wanted, Ana Lucia said earlier, like, I actually had to ask for help. And I think, Seth, you can chime in on this because you're the pro. I want to remind people that you don't have to wait for it to get to a certain level of badness to feel like you need to ask for help or you're going to pursue therapy. There is no standard for how bad it has to get. As soon as there are early signs of distress or esteem issues or personal difficulty, it's okay to pursue professional help.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That's absolutely true. You don't need to have a mental health condition or a diagnosis to try therapy or counseling. If you're feeling overwhelmed at work, it's a perfectly valid reason to reach out for extra help and support. Therapists can do all kinds of things. If you've got a good fit with someone, they can help you to better figure out the sources of stress that you're struggling with, maybe to kind of unpack or reframe some of the things that you're dealing with and think about them in a somewhat different way, help come up with better ways to navigate them. They can help you to come up with better strategies for decompressing and taking care of yourself, identifying your blind spots, reframing your thinking. There's a lot of different things that can be useful. And frankly, just some basic things like goal setting and visualization and relaxation and disrupting the negative thought processes and patterns that you deal with. These are the stock and trade of what folks like me do all the time. This is our job. You guys are experts at UX, and we are experts at helping people to improve coping skills and to be able to feel like you've got your legs under you again. So you absolutely don't need to feel like you've hit rock bottom or that it's somehow a source of shame or that it's emblematic of a failure on your part. Counseling is something that helps people even in when they're dealing with things that are just less than ideal and they're struggling a little bit. And frankly, it's a whole lot easier, to be perfectly honest. It's not impossible to get mental health care when you are not employed, but it's a whole lot easier when you are, when you've got insurance, when you've got an income, when you've got the means to be able to actually have access to that kind of support. Use it. That's what it's for.
Yeah, I want to just jump in with some of the comments. Anne, who is always sharp and funny, says places like Google should have therapists on staff instead of pool tables and dog sitting. I think that is sometimes a perk of the job, but it's probably never enough. Leia is here. Ciao, Leia. Hope you're staying cool in Italy. Leia says, I'm curious what's driving these toxic behaviors in our managers and leaders. I've seen many people become managers over the years. No one turns into a monster overnight. Is this related to the lack of support or development for becoming managers? I would probably, before Seth even answers, no offense, I would probably say, I think for today I'd like to focus more on us than what's up with the toxic people, because Seth and I have done a couple of episodes on that. And I would say for people who'd like to see Seth's past episodes with us, which have all been very soothing and helpful, they are over on the Delta CX YouTube channel in their own playlist. You will find a playlist just dedicated to the time Seth has been on our show. So if you jump over to the Delta CX YouTube channel, you will see, I think it's emotional something, psychological something. It's you have your own playlist, so everybody can check those out, because we've done shows about burnout, we've done them about being gaslit at work and dealing with those toxic managers. Chiwat says, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say two things. I was going to actually comment on one of the comments that just popped up because I happened to see while you were talking. Yeah. And the other was, I'm going to kind of honor the focus in this particular direction, but let me just expand out slightly to
Sure, go
say
ahead.
Sometimes it's about toxic personalities. Sometimes it's about and I like the idea that we're giving people the benefit of the doubt that monsters don't become monsters overnight. Some people are born monsters. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. We've talked about narcissism and toxicity in people. Sometimes, though, it's absolutely true that what we're looking at are people who are people. And it's easy to get stuck in our own perspective and to forget that managers and supervisors and coworkers and other people are all going through a struggle of their own, and sometimes a toxic corporate environment has an impact on everybody at every level. And so it is possible that some of the bad behavior that we're seeing is directly related to poor organizational dynamics, to problems in a kind of top-down leadership structure where everyone ends up getting a piece of it, and it affects everyone's behaviors, and no one is functioning ideally or optimally. But I was going to say that the comment that I was just going to respond to was the I almost
Yeah, Chiwat said, every
almost
time I
call
almost call
helplines.
a helpline, I feel like my problem is not that great, and I'm probably being a drama queen. Maybe one day I'll call. Seth, say something
Yeah,
to Chiwat, our friend in Singapore.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I will. I will. I'm going to. I'm going to be a little bit of a tough guy about this and say, 100% disagree about the drama queen. If you're getting to a point where you are struggling, where the problems are affecting you enough that you're thinking, maybe I need to call a helpline, call a helpline. That's what they're for. Frankly, I've staffed helplines before, and I know lots of people who have, and they get bored a lot of the time when they're not hearing from people. And I've heard some stuff that you would probably chuckle at and say, oh, that's just silly. Why would they bother to call a helpline? And we took it very seriously every time, no matter what the call was, because someone felt it was important enough to make that call. Um, Call, reach out. That's what that stuff is for. It can be, I mean, I know it feels a little silly reaching out to an anonymous person about whatever struggles you're having, but quite frankly, it can be a game changer for a lot of people. And in social psychology, they talk about the stranger on the train phenomenon, the idea of sometimes just having a conversation with someone you don't know and you'll never talk to again has a way of bringing things into a weird kind of clarity for us.
That's a great
Um,
point.
it may be that that's the conversation that you realize something you've said. You hear yourself saying something and realize maybe there's some different way that you need to be thinking about what's going on in your life. So by no means should you ever feel like maybe I'm being a drama queen about this. If work is stressing you out to a point where you're thinking, I'm having a hard time, or anything in your life is stressing you out to that point, a significant relationship, your financial struggles, whatever it is, the poster is not lined up properly on the wall and it's driving you crazy. Call, text. There are text lines. There's a lot of ways to reach out at this point. Use them. That's what they're for.
Yeah, and I want to apologize to people who have been sending in stuff through the anonymous. We're using our office hours anonymous link from deltacx.com/links. My email wasn't coming in, and it all just came in. So we have some questions to take a look at. But first, before we look at those, I want to point at the last comment that came up before Michael's, which was from Shaunak, who said, I turn 26 next month and I feel like I'm too old to succeed in tech. I feel like I should have everything figured out younger in my life if it was not for the market. Which, of course, to me and Seth, you are young. You're half our age.
Yeah. I'm thinking. I mean, this is going to be what I want to say to be a wise guy, and I realize it's not the most sympathetic thing in the world to say because I understand 26 is where you are, and that's what you're feeling. I have a 26-year-old kid. I understand that is their moment. I was 26 once too.
26 already? I remember when your kid
Um,
was born.
I know it's crazy,
Oh,
but here's the thing: how young do you have to be to have it worked out? Like, are we talking 14,
right.
16? Like, there. Yes, I understand tech is a young person's game, but there's plenty of folks who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s and beyond who are still doing valid work and frankly have the wisdom of a little bit of experience. So no, I don't think you have to have everything all figured out and have everything completely all the dots connected. Whether you're talking about tech or you're talking about any other field, you have time, and that again sounds like a lot of internal pressure to kind of get everything together. Um, and that kind of internal critic of you need to have these things in place, you need to have these expectations met, that I think in many cases for most of us is the critic that we most struggle with. It's that internal voice that tells us you should be doing better than you are right now. Um, I'm gonna put in a quick plug. I don't get anything back for any of the endorsements I put out there, but Brene Brown has become somewhat of a love the hashtag. Brene Brown is an American psychologist, and as she describes it, shame researcher, and just become somewhat of a pundit. I love her stuff. She's very down to earth. She's very straightforward. Her books are great. Her TED Talks and other presentations are great. She does a really nice job of talking about this kind of inner critic, and what shame is about and ways that we can try to combat it. It really is something that, I mean, if you're holding yourself back, you're only going to be working at limited capacity, which is not what you want to be doing.
Yeah, and before we get to some of the comments coming in now, I want to get to the people who were lovely enough to send some anonymous things. First, we have an anonymous comment saying, Ana Lucia, you are not alone. I know that's not much help, but hearing your story lets me know that I'm not alone either. We have an anonymous question that said, hello, Dr. Finkle and Debbie. Would love to hear some suggestions on how to practice not letting emotions from overthinking or anxiety cloud logic. Thank you.
Nice. Okay, let's do that. Again, this is going to be a list that I'm going to give you guys right now, just off the cuff, that is going to sound very much like what Chat AI would be telling you, Chat GP would be telling you, what any AI would be telling, because these are basic, and I'm not going to lie. The answers are simpler than you think. So things like prioritize your physical body and your physical health. When we're stuck in our head, we have a tendency to forget that we inhabit a body which is fallible. It requires care and feeding and sleep and relaxation and time to recharge. And it's going to be really important to do that. It's going to be important to continue to exercise, to keep regular sleep-wake cycle, to include a little bit of fun in your life, to make sure that you're getting reasonable nutrition, learning basic relaxation techniques like meditation or mindfulness or prayer or deep breathing exercises that are going to help you.
Go for a walk.
Go for a walk. Do the things, enjoy the meal that you're eating and actually taste it. Breathe and concentrate on the fact that you're breathing. Be in the moment and slow down and be conscious of the things that are going on. You don't have to do it every second of the day. I know you can't, but do it when you can. Take 5 minutes here and there, build them into your routine, schedule them in, download a meditation app that you can use. Pause for a few minutes before you start your workday to set your intention and think about what you want to accomplish. These are basic things, and they're basic things that are constantly repeated for a reason, and that is we all forget to do them. Or we think we're doing them, but then when we really stop and take stock, we realize we're not doing them actively enough. Write it out. Journal. Keep a journal for 2 weeks. Track your stress triggers and the way you react to them. Balance your work and your personal life. When you're out of work, don't be in work. Set reasonable boundaries. We've talked about this in other shows before. Don't have a 24-hour-a-day world in which you're plugged in to work. Give yourself some time not to think about the work that you're doing. Each of these things are things that are going to potentially help, and the more present and focused you can be on something other than the stressful feelings and thoughts, the more control you're going to have over those. Your thoughts are things that just happen. You don't have control over them. What you can control is where you dedicate your awareness. So if you put time and energy into concentrating on those thoughts that happen, you're essentially watching a movie voluntarily, and you don't have to. The thoughts will happen, but you don't have to think about them or give them the attention that they're demanding from you.
And we've got two more long questions that came in anonymously, and then we'll take it look at some of the other comments. So this question says, what do you think about Stoic philosophy, such as the idea that nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so? Personally, I find this perspective helpful when dealing with difficult situations. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I felt frustrated and was considering giving up on UX. However, when I looked at this community, it gave me the strength to persevere and focus on improving my skills and helping others, things I can control. Stoic philosophy, Seth?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's weird. I was literally just having a conversation about Greek Stoicism and cynicism the other day with someone. So, I mean, yes, Stoic philosophy, the idea that things aren't inherently good or bad, but that it's all about the judgments that we place upon them. We can reframe that into so many different things. Buddhist non-attachment. We can talk about it in terms of kind of just the whole notion of judgment and what it can do and how it works. Yeah, no, I think that's very true. It's hard when you're in the midst of feeling anxious to be stoic, right? When you're anxious, we have a tendency to have those automatic thoughts kick in, and we immediately frame things in a good, bad kind of way. It's a survival strategy. It's something that humans do. It's something that all living sentient critters do, but you don't have to do it. And the notion of this philosophy, I think, is a really powerful one, which is you can reframe your thoughts. When you've experienced worry and chronic stress for a long period of time, your mind is going to jump to conclusions, and it's going to read into situations with a negative lens. For example, if your supervisor doesn't say hi to you first thing in the morning, you might think they're mad at me for some reason, as opposed to they're preoccupied, they're stressed out, it's something to do with them. Instead of making those automatic judgments, if we can begin to distance ourselves from our negative thoughts, to realize that our thoughts are not us. They're something that we house, but they're not necessarily us. And if we simply observe them and we allow ourselves the opportunity to think about them in a more objective way sometimes, and to take that deep breath and to relax our bodies so that we can be more rational, we're not going to have those emotions flood through us and drive what we do. At least not as much.
Yeah, we have so many questions coming in. Before we jump to the other anonymous one that came in, I want to jump on what Shweta just wrote, which was, how do you deal with feelings of guilt that you could have done more?
That's a broad question, man. Yeah, I mean, feelings of guilt that you could have done more, it really depends on the circumstances. If we're talking about could have done more to prevent myself from being fired, or prevent the job from, the project from tanking, or prevent that person from making that poor choice, but guilt is a natural human phenomenon. It's universal. It's also notoriously non-productive, as is shame. But the fact of the matter, it doesn't stop us from experiencing it. I think in many cases, it's a conscious choice to rethink what guilt is telling us. Because guilt will tell you a story. It'll tell you a narrative of, if you had only done this, all the shouldas and wouldas and couldas. And we don't have access to any of that. That's all imaginary. The only moment that's real is this moment right this second. And so while all of that stuff is alive in our memory, and it produces emotions of guilt or of shame or of whatever, anger, it's really not useful or constructive in a rational sense, because you can't go back in time. If you could, it would be totally useful. It might shape the way you make decisions in the future. That's useful, that's productive. But to feel guilty about would things have turned out differently, there's absolutely zero way to know. There's too many variables to control. So that's the rational response to it. But of course, guilt is an emotion. It's a thought, but it's also an emotion. And so really, it's a matter of recognize you're feeling it, understand what it's about, and begin to be compassionate enough with yourself to recognize you can't go back in time to change it. So what can you do differently moving forward?
And my advice there, again, not a professional anything, is I just tell people do the best you can each day. And maybe some days your
Yeah,
best is I'm just going to lay in bed and watch wacky YouTube videos. And maybe some days your best is to apply to a few jobs, maybe have an interview. And then at the end of the day, you can say, today I did my best, whatever that was. And that way later on, you don't feel like, oh God, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing my best. Every day, just try to do whatever your best feels like for that day. And it's going to vary. Some days you'll have no energy. Some days you'll be crying. Some days you'll feel deeply sad and scared. And some days you'll feel like you have energy and you can do some things. So if you just try whatever is your best in each day, then when you look back on it, say, not going to judge myself for some of the off days I had. Every day I did my best.
exactly. And recognize that when you've said that this is your best, that it's your best. Like, it's easy to second guess that. Again, we've all got that inner critic who's incredibly harsh, but that's not helpful, and it's not necessary. Your best is the best that you did that day. If you know that you put in your best when you were trying in that moment, there's no looking back on it and saying, I did my best, but I probably could have done. That's not the same. We're talking about in that moment, I did the very best that I could do. That's it. That's the end of that particular conversation with yourself.
Yeah, and Shweta also wrote, I'm wondering how much of our internal critic is influenced by LinkedIn, comparisons, and a high performing tech culture, because you have people bragging about getting rich at 25 and you see people getting promoted and getting ahead. And I think we have to remember a few things. In some cases, those are lies. In some cases, those are short-lived. I mean, everybody who watched yesterday knows that I'm not wearing any makeup today. This is my new camera doing a facial touch-up on me. So this isn't exactly what I look like. There's, that's a small lie, but not everything that's posted to the public is the truth, and a lot of people are posting things that are half true or not true, or sometimes you see people saying, I'm so successful, I'm so rich, and then they have some giant downfall. So I think the question is, why are we even comparing ourselves to them? They're not living our life, they're not living our reality, they're on their path, and maybe they caught some luck, whatever. I could say the same thing. Out of all of the semi-popular UX talking heads, I might have the least money of all of them. So what? Now
Exactly.
what?
As my wife quotes someone else as saying, and I don't know the original source of it, but it comes down to food culture and diet culture and that sort of thing. And the expression is, keep your eyes on your own plate, which is something I think about all the time in every aspect of my life. That my own plate is the only one I've got. And frankly, there's a ton of studies for much longer than the last 3 years looking at social media culture of all kinds. And LinkedIn is social media, like it or not. It's professional, but it's still social media. The more time we spend connected to social media, the more hours a day we spend plugged into these things, the more depressed we become. This has been shown in a variety of different pieces of research at this point. And this is largely the theory as to why, is exactly what you're saying, Debbie, that people curate what they put out there. They do it as a way of trying to make themselves look better, feel better, be more marketable, whatever. Whether it's purely internal psychological validation, or whether it's to try to make themselves more appealing to employers down the road, it's bragging. That's all it is. It's showing off. And lots of us do it. Very few of us put out content that says, I'm a complete loser, right? God bless the people who do. I love reading their stuff, but there are very few who do. Most of us are too ashamed to do that. We're too embarrassed to do that. So what you put out there is the best possible version of yourself, and sometimes a better version of yourself than you really are. It's the airbrushed version of yourself.
That's me today.
So,
I'm sorry I'm cracking up. Was it Jurgen who posted to the Slack group the video of the people reading the weird LinkedIn posts where a guy was like, not everybody's going to have a good day. My grandfather ran over a toddler. And you're just like, wait, what just happened?
Oh my God.
What just happened in this post? And why is this on LinkedIn? And, it was supposed to be some sort of story that I guess was going to inspire you in some way, because evidently the guy finished his post with, and history repeats because I recently ran over a child with my car. And you're just like, what is this? Thomas's point is posting something. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can't click on his LinkedIn link. You can try to Google for whatever that was. But
if I'm scanning Thomas correctly, it sounds like he's in he's given a thumbs up to this, and showing some more specific kind of research to back it up. That definitely. LinkedIn and frankly all social media are causing us to set these unrealistic expectations for ourselves. Social media does it in terms of how we look, what we eat, how active we are, and how beautiful our homes are, and how much we love our children and our pets, and the care we take of ourselves. And all of it is advertising. All of it is something that's been designed to achieve a common purpose. It is not truth.
Yeah, and it's designed to manipulate us, and we in UX know this, so we've got to be a little smarter and see when it's being done to us. My advice is, when I go on LinkedIn, I read about 10 posts. If I don't feel good after reading those, if I didn't feel like I read something that was going to assist me in some way or make me think of something, I close LinkedIn. That's it. You do not have to doom scroll. You do not have to pour through things, and you do not have to pull the slot machine handle until you find a LinkedIn post you liked and want to respond to. Go on to LinkedIn, read the first 10 posts they show you, and if it sucks, close it. Move on to something else. Anything else is better than that.
Watch Debbie's videos.
Yes, there's only 800 over on the Delta CX channel and a growing number here. I just put up the Customers Know You Suck audiobook for free on this channel. You can listen to that. I want to mention what Michael wrote, and then I want to get to the anonymous question we have. Michael said, I just made a tiny mistake at work and I told my peers I'm a dum-dum. I don't recommend that, and I don't like that because you're not a dum-dum. And we're not saying dumb anymore because it is an offensive word to the disabled community. So if you make a tiny mistake at work, just say, oops, I made a mistake. But you are still smart and capable and deserving of your job. Please, people, don't poop on yourselves. Don't make yourselves smaller just because you made a mistake. We all make mistakes. Don't tell people, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm bad at this. Seth, what is that in psychology? I don't like it. Don't do it, everybody.
I will say, there's a lot of ways we could talk about it. It's your superego. It's, again, your inner critic. It's a need to, it's a fear of external invalidation. And so we tend to kind of do something, either we'll use humor or we'll discredit ourselves or something like that. Props to Michael, though, for putting that out there and for saying that and acknowledging that that's something that you said. I'm clearly getting the sense that you're not putting it out there, that this was something that you felt in hindsight was the right thing to say or a great thing to say, but something that you recognized that you said. And good for noting that, for paying attention to the fact that it's something that you said that maybe you realize, maybe I was being too hard on myself. Maybe I was being kind of that extra critic. Maybe I verbalized it, which is, maybe not the right thing to do under the circumstances. It certainly doesn't add to your credibility. And if anything, it makes you seem less secure. So I think it's important to note, to see yourself saying that. And even if you've said it out loud, to recognize you said it and think about that. Think about what that means in terms of who you are, how you feel about yourself and your mistakes, whether or not you see yourself as a perfectionist, and give yourself a little more grace, perhaps, the next time around.
Yeah, now I finally want to get to someone who sent in an anonymous thing, unfortunately, like 20 minutes ago. Thanks to that person for their patience. Okay, this person wrote, and thank you for sharing. I have been struggling with extreme burnout and health issues for over a year. I took a health leave from work and returned to find a toxic environment with ongoing discrimination and stonewalling from my manager. I found no useful support from HR or employee resource groups in trying to address these issues. It became clear to me and was pointed out by my therapist that the ongoing trauma was preventing me from healing, never mind moving forward. I finally left the company a few weeks ago. I have no idea what's next. Given my age and the job market, I'm worried I may not find a job for several years. I'm working on healing and diversifying, but it's a tough place to be.
Wow, I love that account. I'm so sorry to hear it, but I love it for a couple reasons. I don't want to comment a whole lot on it because I don't think it needs much. But let me first of all say good for you for being courageous, because I know that's incredibly scary, especially all the things we've talked about with this being an incredibly rough job market, and particularly a rough sector and a rough subsector of the job market. It is a huge leap of faith. And I realize that is why a lot of people stick around in jobs that are uncomfortable or unproductive or frankly toxic, is because they're worried, what if I can't find something else? But you're absolutely right. And I'm glad that you talked about it with your therapist and you came to this conclusion. Working in a toxic environment is not necessarily any better than struggling out there and trying to figure out what the next thing is going to be. Yes, we need to eat. We need a roof over our head. We need those things. There are other jobs, and in some cases, breaking up the job search into smaller tasks, prioritizing, upskilling yourself, taking part-time education or online courses, looking up videos to try to increase your professional skill set, do some in-house training. But when you stick around in a job that is causing you harm, it becomes a vicious spiral downward, and you end up becoming less and less productive, which ironically in many cases leads to you being terminated from that job under less than ideal circumstances. At least in this case, it's on your terms. You've got the ability to time when you do it. You can plan a little bit, you can manage your money, you can stick to a schedule, you can have a game plan going into what's going to be your plan during that time. Sometimes you don't have a lot of control over those variables, but it's better to be able to do it on your terms than to feel like all of the emotions that come from, I lost my job because I did a bad job and I was fired. And unfortunately, that can happen if you continue to stick with a workplace that's causing you essentially harm and causes you to do less and less quality work over time. So is a bad job better than no job? I think everyone has to make their own decisions about that. But frankly, I'm glad it sounds like it was the right call and your choice to be able to choose a different path.
Yeah, thanks for that. And again, to the person for sharing. I know we only have a few more minutes left, even though we said we could run a little late if we had to. And I know we wanted to talk more about how do you find a therapist? How do you know if they're good or bad or right for you? And if you started with a therapist and it doesn't seem to be working or something's not right, is it okay to walk away from that therapist, or do you have to stick it out? Can you tell us more about finding the right person to talk to?
Sure, yeah. So, towards the top of the hour, we were talking about some of the things that therapy can do for people. The idea that it can help people learn a set of skills, it can help you reframe things, it can help you to kind of rethink things. I think it's helpful, like everything else, to go into therapy with a sense of what it is that you want to get out of it, what you want to accomplish. And that should help to guide you in terms of whether or not the fit with a therapist is a good one. If you go in and what you're seeking is just validation, that's the goal, is to have someone validate your feelings because you're not getting that anyplace else in your life. Know that. If you're going in seeking a specific toolkit of skills, know that. If you're going in with a specific question or problem or issue, I'm finding myself overwhelmed with emotions. How do I keep myself from diving into that pool and allow myself to be more logical about things? Or how do I keep myself from getting taken advantage of by people who are constantly manipulating me? Or how do I allow myself to improve my self-esteem and not constantly feel like I'm the dumbest person in the room, right? How do I do this? I think knowing that these are some of your goals up front, and a good therapist should help you to kind of frame some of this, but do it for yourself before you start the process. Reassess what it is you're trying to do. Excuse me. And I think if you go into it with that, within the first handful of sessions, 3, 4, 6, whatever, the goal is to figure out for yourself, is this relationship bringing that to me? Is this helping me to get closer to those goals? If it is, keep doing it. If it's not, then maybe it's time to think about a different therapist. And if you're doing this through online therapy, it's generally not difficult to be able to make a switch. If you're doing it through a group practice, it's not difficult to be able to find someone and say, I just don't feel like this is working for me. Is there someone else in the practice who might be able to help me out? If you're working with a solo practitioner and you're in face-to-face therapy and it's just not working, it's okay to tell them that. It is a relationship like any other. They can potentially either kind of navigate things differently and try something different with you and see if you can get closer to meeting your goals. Or it's perfectly okay to tell them, I don't think this is working for me, and to try someone different. There's no shortage at the moment. There's actually a lot of competition in the field of mental health. It's not always in every geographical region, but again, there is online therapy, and while it's not ideal, it's widespread, it's easy to find. In many cases, it can be fairly affordable. We could talk about all of the different kinds of credentials and skill sets that therapists have, and how do I shop for a good one? That's a whole nother conversation. In the end, I think if you spin the wheel, find a person, give it a shot. It's a lot like speed dating. You're giving it a try, seeing how it works. But I would say stick with it for a couple of times. It doesn't always feel like the first session or two is going to be magic. But if you're feeling like you're getting closer to the goals that you have set out for yourself along the way, that's probably a good sign that you're working with the right person. And if not, it's okay to make a switch.
Yeah, and I've dumped a few therapists in my life, and so I can certainly say that sometimes you start with someone, you go to them a few times, they're getting to know you, you might be starting to talk about some baseline stuff. Hey, here's some wacky childhood stuff. Here's some things that still trigger me. Here's some things that always hurt. And if you feel like that person isn't responding appropriately, or there's just something that's not sitting right with you, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not coming back here. That probably won't be the first time or last time that person has heard it. Not everybody's going to match everybody, and it's okay with any kind of mentor or coach or life coach or therapist or person just to be like, this isn't a match for me, and that will help you rethink your goals and what you really hoped to get out of those sessions that you weren't getting, and maybe find a better match.
That's exactly right. Yeah, remember, you're paying them. They are working for you, trying to help you to do something. And if you're seeing red flags or something that tells you this isn't good, I would say drop them like a hot potato. But if you're just feeling like, I don't know, I can't really tell if this is helping or not, I think it's perfectly fair to be perfectly honest and upfront about that with them. They're doing this to help you. This is not a mutual relationship. This is a relationship designed to help you to accomplish something. And if it's not doing that, it's okay to help them to help you better, to work that out, or to find someone who can do a better job.
And remember, everybody, like CX and UX, you don't have to know your own problem. You don't have to know what's going wrong or how to fix it. You're coming to them. They're going to be the problem finder. They're going to be the problem solver. And that's fine. It can't always be us. Even the problem finder and solver needs a problem finder and solver. If I may speak personally for a moment, when I was going to college and Seth was one of the first friends I made there, he wasn't wasn't a properly licensed psychologist at the time, but he was on his way there, and he was one of the best friends I ever had, and still have, luckily. Thank you for that. And he was somebody who saw me through some of the worst times in my life and the most confusing. And he was someone who I could trust, who I could talk to. And I think you have to just find that person in your life, and they could be a friend, they could be a paid helper of some sort, they could be a coach, but whoever it is, you just want to make sure it's someone who you feel trust for. And if you're speaking with someone new, and that trust isn't there, and it doesn't seem to be developing, listen to your gut. But I always wish everybody could have a Seth in their life, just because of the beyond our day-to-day friendship. Just the I'll always be grateful for the things Seth helped me with, that stuff, back in the late 80s into the early 90s. That support he gave me at those worst times is irreplaceable, and I would have paid for that, and I should have paid for that, but that luckily came with the friendship. So for some of you, you'll have friends who you can lean on, and some of you will feel like, I can't talk to my friends about this. You just have to find someone.
You're so sweet. No, that's absolutely true. I think knowing that there are people that you can talk to, whether it's family or friends or trusted, be careful with trusted coworkers and friends, because, sometimes things have a way of kind of spilling out in a way that aren't always helpful. But if there's people that you can legitimately trust, talk to them. And if you don't have those people in your life, or do you feel like you need someone who's not right in the middle of it with you, that's what professionals are for. I also, as a full disclosure, I have seen countless therapists over the years. I literally can't count them. There have been a lot. I've used psychiatric medication, still do. And there's no shame in any of this stuff. We have a body, we have a brain, we have a mind. Those things require care and feeding and watering and sunshine, and sometimes a little bit of extra help. And when things are really hard, that's a time when we need extra help. It's an investment in yourself and in your own well-being and your own mental health. There's absolutely zero shame in it. And frankly, it can be the game changer that helps you sometimes just ground yourself and move on.
Put on your oxygen mask first.
Always.
Yeah. Seth, we're going to be winding up now that we've been together for an hour. I know we could always go on for longer. I'm sure we'll have to have you back. If everybody wants to see Dr. Seth back or covering another topic, you know where to find me. Just send me a message, comment under this video on YouTube. I always see the comments, or send me a Slack message. But if anybody has any last comments or thoughts, please get them in now, because we're going to wind up. But Seth, any other last comments or thoughts for the audience on this topic?
Wow. Let me say this. If you are currently experiencing job loss, whether you've left a job or whether you are contemplating leaving a job, or you're worried about losing a job, or whether you've been cut loose from your work, it's a really hard time. It's easy to take it personally. It's easy to have all kinds of physical reactions and feelings, to be shocked, to have disbelief, to have all kinds of problems that affect every aspect of our bodies. These are rough waters, but there are definitely strategies that you can do, things that can help you to navigate the uncertainty and the anxiety of this major life transition. Take a little time, allow yourself the time to process, to be a human. Give yourself permission to be upset if you're having difficulties, but give yourself timed boundaries. Give yourself a predetermined period of time, 72 hours, a week, whatever it is, to wallow in some of those feelings that deserve to be acknowledged, but don't let them run the show. It's important that you can take steps to stabilize your future and get back to feeling grounded, to feeling like you're moving forward, to feeling like you are living out your values in your life and your job. We've talked about a variety of different ways to try to keep yourself healthy physically and mentally. Allow yourself the time to struggle, but give yourself the grace of being able to kind of invest in yourself and to move forward, because every single person is worth that.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of that. And it makes me also think about my life coach, who I haven't seen lately, but has done me a lot of good over the years. And when I was still living in America, and she asked me, like, what are you doing for self care? And you know me, I'm just a workaholic. I'm at this computer 92 hours a day. And I said, well, I like to try to jump on my motorcycle and just ride, but I feel guilty that I'm burning gasoline and destroying the planet. And she said, you get good gas mileage on that thing. Go out there and ride. You know, you're not destroying the planet. And I just said, I just love going out there, blasting music in my helmet and feeling like I'm flying. Because you know, a good scooter or motorcycle can feel like that, and I think everybody has to find whatever that is for them. I haven't been on my bike in many years, and it's not in a good state of repair, and I miss that. I miss that feeling, and so you know, everybody should. I hope after this show you'll think about what makes you feel like you're flying in a good way that is hopefully safe and legal. Preferably, but
Absolutely.
you choose. All right, I'm going to play us out of here. Seth, we hope to see you soon. Thank you again for your time and advice. Thanks to everybody who opened up and told us some of their feelings and stories quite openly. And let's see, our next show is tomorrow. We'll be talking about UX and Agile, a slightly different subject, but maybe the cause of some of these problems. But we'll just say to be continued. So, Seth, thanks again, and bye, everybody.
Thank you. Always great.